You're waking up in a hospital bed. Someone is calling your name. Your eyes slowly open. The room is unfamiliar. Your mouth is dry. Your arm feels heavy. You glance at the clock on the wall, and that's when something impossible occurs to you. It's 4 hours later. Except, from your perspective, those 4 hours never happened. You don't remember drifting away. You don't remember sleeping. You don't remember dreaming. One moment you were talking to the anesthesiologist. The next moment someone is offering you a cup of water. It's as if a small piece of your life has been carefully cut out and stitched back together without leaving a scar. Most people accept this as one of modern medicine's little miracles. You had surgery. The doctors did their job. Everything went well. But almost nobody asks the obvious question. Where did those missing hours actually go? Because time itself didn't disappear. Only your awareness of it did. Now imagine asking that same question 40,000 years ago. There are no hospitals, no surgeons, no anesthetic drugs, no scientific explanation for consciousness. Yet your ancestors still watched people lose consciousness all the time. A hunter falls from a cliff. A child collapses with a fever. An elder faints from exhaustion after days without food. Someone eats the wrong berries and suddenly becomes completely unresponsive. Their heart still beats. Their chest still rises. But the person they were seems to have vanished. Where did they go? For hundreds of thousands of years, this may have been one of the greatest mysteries humans ever faced. And strangely enough, modern science still doesn't have a complete answer. For most of human history, unconsciousness wasn't something doctors created. It was something nature imposed. Your ancestors encountered it through injury, illness, starvation, poisonous plants, childbirth, extreme cold, and sometimes for reasons nobody understood at all. Imagine living in a world where every unexplained event demanded an explanation. Lightning, dreams, death, the changing seasons, everything had meaning because there was no alternative. So when someone suddenly lost consciousness but later woke up completely unharmed, what conclusion would you reach? Without microscopes, without neuroscience, without even knowing the brain-controlled thought, the answer probably wouldn't sound scientific. It would sound spiritual. Archaeologists can't excavate beliefs directly. Ideas don't fossilize. But they can study burials, cave art, ritual objects, and the traditions preserved among societies whose ways of life changed very little over thousands of years. Taken together, they reveal something remarkable. Across continents, separated by oceans and thousands of years, humans kept arriving at surprisingly similar conclusions. The body stayed behind. Something else traveled. Ancient Egyptians believed part of a person could leave the body during dreams and return before waking. Many indigenous cultures across Australia and the Americas described dreams as genuine journeys rather than imaginary experiences. Early Siberian shamans entered trances they believed allowed their spirits to travel beyond the physical world. Even the ancient Greeks imagined that sleep and death were closely connected, describing them as brothers born from the same mysterious force. These cultures shared almost nothing else: different languages, different environments, different histories, yet they all treated unconsciousness as movement rather than absence. Something had gone somewhere. Think about how reasonable that conclusion would seem if you had never seen a brain. You know that thoughts exist. You know memories exist. You know personalities exist. Then one afternoon, your closest friend falls unconscious after being struck by a falling tree. His body is still there. His face hasn't changed. But somehow, he isn't. Hours later, he wakes up, confused, unable to remember what happened. Wouldn't it seem as though the most important part of him had briefly left? Even today, the experience feels strangely similar. General anesthesia creates one of the oldest human mysteries using one of the newest inventions. You willingly allow complete strangers to remove your awareness for several hours. Not your heartbeat, not your breathing, not your body, only your conscious experience. And then they give it back. That would have looked like magic to every generation that came before us. But here's what's fascinating. Ancient humans didn't just wonder about unconsciousness. They actively searched for ways to enter unusual states of mind. Long before written history, people discovered that certain plants could dramatically alter awareness. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence that prehistoric communities collected psychoactive mushrooms, fermented drinks, and medicinal herbs thousands of years before civilization appeared. Some of these substances relieved pain, others produced vivid visions, some caused deep sleep, others blurred the line between dreams and waking life. Nobody knew why they worked, but everyone noticed they changed something invisible: the mind. Over time, these experiences became woven into rituals, not because ancient humans were irrational, because they were paying attention. If certain plants allowed people to see things no one else could, speak with unseen ancestors, or awaken with memories unlike ordinary dreams, then perhaps consciousness wasn't fixed after all? Perhaps it could travel. Perhaps it could expand. Perhaps reality itself was larger than everyday life suggested. Whether those conclusions were correct isn't really the point. What's remarkable is that humans everywhere were trying to answer the same question: what exactly is the thing inside us that experiences the world? Thousands of years later, science began replacing myths with experiments. The invisible soul became electrical activity. Spirits became neurons. Sacred breath became oxygen. Slowly, one mystery after another received an explanation: lightning, disease, the movement of planets. But consciousness refused to cooperate. The deeper scientists looked inside the brain, the stranger it became. Every thought, every memory, every emotion corresponded to billions of tiny electrical signals moving through a 3-pound organ made mostly of fat and water. Yet nobody could explain why those signals created experience. Why should electricity produce the feeling of seeing blue, or tasting bread, or remembering your childhood? The brain could be measured. Consciousness could not. Then, in the 19th century, something extraordinary happened. Doctors accidentally discovered they could temporarily erase awareness without stopping life itself. The first successful public demonstrations of ether anesthesia shocked the medical world. Patients who would once have screamed through surgery simply didn't. They survived. They woke up. And most astonishing of all, they remembered nothing. It felt like medicine had conquered one of humanity's oldest fears. But in reality, it had created an even bigger mystery. Because doctors had learned how to make consciousness disappear, long before anyone understood what consciousness actually was. And that's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because when scientists finally began studying what anesthesia does inside the brain, they discovered something your ancestors never could have imagined. Many neuroscientists believe consciousness may temporarily fragment as communication between brain networks breaks down. At least that's what a growing number of neuroscientists now believe. For decades, doctors imagined the brain under anesthesia like a machine whose power had been turned off. It was a simple explanation, and for a while, it seemed good enough. But when researchers began placing electrodes across patients' heads during surgery, they saw something unexpected. The brain never went silent. Even during the deepest levels of general anesthesia, billions of neurons continued firing. Electrical activity never completely disappeared. Blood still flowed. Cells still communicated. The brain was still alive. So why wasn't the person? This is where the story becomes stranger than most people realize. Your brain isn't one single computer. It's closer to a city. One region recognizes faces. Another understands language. Another stores memories. Others control movement, emotion, hearing, balance, and vision. Every second of your life, these different regions exchange enormous amounts of information. Not occasionally, constantly. Scientists estimate that billions upon billions of signals travel through your brain every single second. Some researchers believe consciousness isn't created by any one region. Instead, it appears when all those regions work together. Imagine standing in the middle of a crowded marketplace. Hundreds of conversations happen around you. Merchants shout prices, children laugh, musicians perform, animals make noise. Individually, none of these sounds represent the marketplace. Together, they create the experience. Your conscious mind may work exactly the same way, not as one voice, but as billions speaking together. General anesthesia appears to interrupt that conversation. The individual regions continue working, but they stop working together. Researchers using brain imaging have found that communication between distant brain networks drops dramatically after anesthetic drugs enter the bloodstream. Messages that normally travel freely suddenly struggle to reach their destination. It's as though thousands of bridges connecting different parts of the brain disappear all at once. The cities remain, the roads do not. Think about what that means. The memories you've built since childhood still exist. Your eyesight still works, your hearing still functions. Your emotions haven't vanished. Nothing has actually been removed. The connections simply stop becoming one experience. Perhaps that's why waking from anesthesia feels so strange. You don't feel like you've returned from somewhere. You feel like time itself has been edited. One sentence, then the next. Everything in between simply doesn't exist. Ancient humans could never have imagined this explanation. But they noticed something equally fascinating. People who lost consciousness often returned changed. A hunter who survived a head injury might claim to have seen deceased relatives. Someone recovering from a dangerous fever might describe impossible dreams. A woman surviving childbirth could tell stories of strange journeys while she lay unconscious. Modern medicine recognizes many of these experiences as the effects of trauma, oxygen deprivation, fever, or altered brain chemistry. But to your ancestors, these stories became evidence. Evidence that consciousness really had traveled somewhere. Think about how powerful those stories must have been. You live in a world without books, without television, without written history. Knowledge survives only if people remember it. So imagine sitting around a fire while the oldest member of your group tells everyone about the time he nearly died during a hunt. He describes seeing places no one has visited, speaking with people long gone, returning with knowledge he couldn't explain. Would you dismiss him, or would you believe every word? Across thousands of generations, experiences like these became myths. Those myths became traditions. Those traditions became religions. Not because ancient humans were foolish, because they were trying to explain observations with the only tools they possessed, stories. And in many ways, stories are still how humans understand the unknown. Today, the language has changed. Instead of spirits, we discuss neurotransmitters. Instead of souls, we map brain networks. Instead of sacred journeys, we analyze electrical activity. But the mystery remains remarkably similar. Why does consciousness disappear at all? One of the most surprising discoveries in modern neuroscience is that awareness isn't an all-or-nothing state. It exists on a spectrum. You're different when you're fully awake, different during deep sleep, different while dreaming, different during meditation, different after drinking alcohol, different under anesthesia, different again in a coma. The brain can produce many kinds of consciousness, or perhaps many kinds of unconsciousness. General anesthesia is simply one of them. That becomes especially obvious when doctors use different anesthetic drugs. Some patients experience absolute nothingness. Others report brief dreams. A few remember fragments of voices. Certain drugs even produce vivid hallucinations that feel astonishingly real. Ketamine is one famous example. Unlike many anesthetics, it doesn't simply suppress awareness, it changes it. Patients often describe floating above their bodies, watching themselves from impossible angles, traveling through geometric landscapes, feeling disconnected from physical reality. These experiences sound almost supernatural, yet they can often be reproduced inside a hospital. That realization has forced scientists to ask another uncomfortable question. If consciousness can be altered in so many different ways, how many versions of reality is your brain actually capable of creating? No one knows. Perhaps your normal waking life is only one possible arrangement among countless others. Perhaps consciousness isn't a destination. It's a constantly changing process, one your brain rebuilds every moment you're alive. Your ancestors sensed something similar. They didn't possess MRI scanners. They had campfires. They didn't collect brain scans. They collected stories, generation after generation, century after century. Every culture added another piece to humanity's oldest puzzle. Where do we go? When awareness disappears, modern medicine answers differently. Now we understand that anesthesia doesn't send you anywhere. It changes the way billions of neurons communicate. It interrupts the process that allows separate parts of your brain to become one unified experience. But notice something. That explanation tells us how consciousness disappears. It still doesn't explain what consciousness actually is. And that's the remarkable part. After centuries of scientific discovery, after mapping the human genome, after landing on the moon, after building machines capable of performing surgery with robotic precision, humanity still cannot answer one of its oldest questions. What is the thing inside your head that allows you to know you're alive? Perhaps that's why this mystery has survived for so long. It isn't really about anesthesia, or dreams, or ancient beliefs. It's about identity, because every single morning you wake up assuming you'll still be you. General anesthesia quietly proves that assumption is more fragile than it feels. For a few hours, the continuous story your brain has been telling since childhood simply pauses, not because your life ends, but because the conversation inside your brain briefly stops speaking with one voice. Then, almost effortlessly, it begins again. And maybe that's the closest modern science has come to answering a question your ancestors first asked beside a campfire tens of thousands of years ago. Not where consciousness goes, but how astonishing it is that it returns at all.